Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode and a really interesting follow-up this week because for a start I loved last week's show. I think a lot of you in the audience felt the same way. It was really exciting for me to have a blank canvas. So often when a client comes to me they know pretty much exactly what they want. I'm very limited, they just want to know how to do this thing well. When somebody comes to me who is open to almost anything, that is a real gift. So for that alone, thank you, Farinaz, because it really is a gift and a rare opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a few changes this week in that Kellen doesn't seem to be with us. I think I heard somewhere that he's ended up in some sort of meeting in Toronto. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I have a full panel nonetheless, so I will allow them to introduce themselves, starting with my ever-faithful sidekick, Lee.
Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Lee Rickler, and I'm going to be very quiet because I'm just listening to everybody, the esteemed panel, as you were.
Excellent. Next up, of course, our client, Farinaz. Please say hello.
Me?
Yes,
What?
please.
Did you ask me or?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I'm just glad to be here and continue our program. And I did a lot of homework this past few days, and I'm just excited about the whole thing. Thank you.
Excellent. Gina, say hello.
Hi, I'm Gina Fidel. I'm really delighted to be here and see what I might be able to add in on this. The show last week was really fascinating, got me thinking, and I'm just really glad to be here.
And an unscheduled extra guest, but nonetheless extremely welcome, Alex.
Thanks. Hi. If I don't provide more insights than Kellen could have, maybe I'm better looking at least, so that helps out. I'm Alex. For those of you that don't know me, I've come to be known for kind of a communication person. I'm getting my master's degree in communication, so Ammon was like, books have to do with communication, right? And I was like, yep, they do. So that's how I ended up here today.
And of course, this particular book is very interesting because the way we were discussing it, it addresses so many different kinds of communication, because it's not just a book of narrative, it's not just a book of historical stories, it's not just a biography, but there's also the poetry, there's the bringing in sources from different cultures, and of course one of the things that we all decided this thing needs is lots of different imagery as well. And again, that should be coming from lots of different sources. That sometimes when you're talking about a particular event in life, you might have news footage, particularly if you were talking about one of the projects you were involved in with the World Health Organization, Fairness, is that you might have, you know, if there was a particular event that had caused a lot of refugees or anything like that that you were working with, you might have news footage of that, plus some historical art from that culture, plus some contemporary art that was to do with the story and the narrative you were giving. So definitely communication.
Yeah, that's right. Great.
Well, the foremost question that I identified from last week was, why a book? How do we know that a book is the right step? And for whom is a book the right step? Who wouldn't this be a good point for? So the first thing I want to do is kind of give a bit more background into why I so quickly identified a book as the way to go. Now, the first thing, Farinaz, is this was on your wish list. This was something you'd already decided you wanted to do. You weren't sure whether it was going to be the first priority. You knew you wanted to write a book, and we knew that there was at least one fantastic book inside you, and I think there's a lot more than that. So the fact that you wanted to is one factor. The second one is really important. because there's a lot of people who'd quite like to have author after their name, but you actually can write. And that may seem like a really simple point, but there's a lot of people who want to write a book who are not writers. And you are a writer, so you not only have the will to do this, the motivation, but you're equipped to do it. You don't have to go off and learn how to write first. And there's a lot of people out there who may be thinking of publishing an ebook where maybe they would need to brush up their writing skills first. The final thing is, you had a lot of different interests. The personal coaching, the telling your story, the poetry. Being an author is the very first thing that can empower all of those. It's one of the ways I describe this is it can be as important sometimes to have author after your name as to have letters from a doctorate. But a doctorate is going to take you 6-7 years of study to get. A book, well, the only limit on time that takes is how fast you work on it. And it can be just as effective a title. So on that grounds, it would be silly not to go for this. It's going to empower everything else you do. So that's pretty much why a book's aimed so high on the priorities, that all of those things align to get that into place. Does that make sense to you, Farinaz?
Yes. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Now, Gina, I know that you are a very passionate writer. I love some of your work, and there's a poetry about your turn of phrase. There is a poetic aspect to all of your writing. How come you haven't written a book?
Well, I'm not there yet. Writing's relatively new to me, frankly. I've been writing for it's coming on about 2 years, and I feel that I've really only been writing from the heart in a really very felt way probably for about a year. And I've been trying to marry, my general purpose has been to write for our business website blog, which is, we're a web development company. So luckily the subject matter is very, very wide, which gives me a lot of room to play. But it took me a long time to kind of get some traction with how to bring who I am, really truly who I am, into the writing with how we run our company and how I work with clients and what I might have to offer them. So it's been kind of a process in finding my voice, which I guess, you know, is the deal. And I haven't even regarded myself as a writer until pretty recently. So it's really exciting. I do really, really love it. I'm very passionate. You're correct on that.
Well, it's one of those things. It's very hard to believe you've only been doing this a year, Gina, because you are an absolute natural at it. Your pacing and your turn of phrase is superb.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Coming from you.
See, now I thought you were going to say lack of time, because that's the reason that a lot of people who have a book in them that's screaming to come out, the very first thing is, I haven't the time. It takes months to write a book, which is where Kellen was going to come in this episode, because he's been developing a process and he's got a 2-day book challenge, and literally he will get a book out of you in 2 days. And from sketching out the ideas, getting down the order, putting them on the post-its and playing around with what order those chapters are going in, 2 days. You know, and that's his challenge. He absolutely stands by that, and you know what? He's fine. Personally, I'd then put in a week or two brushing it up further, but that's because I'm a perfectionist. But
Me too.
It's something to consider, that actually what holds us back most is reticence to take the first step. Once we start, momentum carries us a long, long way forward.
That's so true, and I learned that as a painter too, you know, and just it's the getting started that's the hardest part for any creative activity in my mind. And And you're right about time. And I find it really hard to imagine. It takes me more than 2 days to write one of my blog posts, so a whole book. I think what happens for people who love to write and who may have a dream towards perhaps putting together a book at some point, if they're anything like me, it's kind of like, well, what would be the core of the book? What would make it a cohesive object that would be worthwhile for somebody to spend time with? And the concern, I think, would be for myself, like how to distill all of the things that I'm interested in into one kind of message or package that may be made up of parts. And perhaps if I were ever to write a book, it could be an essay kind of book. But I think coming around to that place where you know what the singular kind of thrust will be is really critical. And that's what you're working with here with Farinaz. It's kind of finding a way. You've led an extraordinary life. I mean, just wow, just wow. I just can't even believe how much you've done and all the experiences that you've had and all of your skills and talent, and how do you wrap that into a container that you can hand off to somebody? And I think that's going to be your only challenge with this, is how to take all the disparate parts and put them into a cohesive whole. But you can do it. I'm convinced you can do it.
I think you're very right about this, that we need to have to find that central, the core of what we really want to tell people with the book.
Right.
That I have because my life is all about creating awareness, because the awareness has helped me, and then having that hard circumstances in life is showing me that really people do a lot of things because of not being aware, not having that awareness. So if I can somehow bring the messages and be the person who does that, I think that's my passion. And so far I have good indications that people like that. People like to hear things that it touches their heart, and it makes them feel that, oh, this is the message is for me. I can understand it. Or I can relate to it. So that's what my hope is.
I think one of the things that really occurred to me last week is that the message that's so powerful right now in the world generally is that we're not so different. That the borders and boundaries and differences in actual lifestyle don't make so much difference. That what's really interesting to people right now is what brings us together as humanity rather than what separates us.
Here, here.
Understanding how your experiences in the Far East with the poor taught you things that still apply to your life in Arizona. To understand that there are core things about humanity that you can pick up almost anywhere, and that those differences that we used to worry about in the past, as we know, as the internet brings us all together, are so much less and less. And I think that is not only a message that's absolutely on its time, but is also something we want to learn so much more about.
Yes, that's really true. And if we can somehow clarify that in our HOAs, that the club that you were suggesting and all that, so we take the audience with us, and it will be very exciting. That and we can show really all this, all what you said. Really, it's true. by experience.
Lee's just picked up a comment from Manny here, which says that a colleague of his cranked out the book in 2 days using that program with Kellen that we mentioned. There is a link to it in the event description. But it is absolutely possible to do this. Let me just pull up another comment here by Manny. He says he loves that message. A lot of evil is just mindless behaviour with no self-awareness, and that's so true. Ignorance is sometimes the biggest form of evil. It's doing things without thinking that is so often at the root of so much that's wrong. Nobody sane ever sees themselves as evil. They just see themselves doing what they need to do. And almost all evil that's done in the world is done just through mindlessness, just through not thinking of the consequences, not thinking of the other perspective. And I think one of the things I would love for your book to do is to show people other perspectives and to look at how one event can be seen in 3 or 4 different positions. Your position while working with the World Health Organization, the position of the people you were helping, and the position of people back home who maybe didn't even know this was going on, or the fact that sometimes these things are preventable, but nobody really wants to spend the resources on preventing it because that won't get them any votes, and there's other places to spend money that will get them votes. And I think a story that does that looks at those different perspectives is really where this is. It's about the past perspectives and the current perspectives. It's about your perspectives and the villagers' perspectives and the politicians' perspectives, and being able to see that kind of thing and rotate it and see it from all sides, I think absolutely ties into that one word that we keep coming back to: awareness.
Awareness. That's right. And maybe that will encourage others to come forward who have the similar ideas, and there are a lot of them, and so that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that it's possible to produce a book quite quickly, and what are the kind of steps behind that? Well, the very first thing is know what your message is. One of the things we talked about last week was doing a poetry reading class, where you would pick a couple of poems that you wanted to share with people. You'd do a hangout where you got to share those and then got their thoughts on them. And I think that would be a great way of fleshing out parts of a chapter as you were going through this. It not only helps you test out, whether this affects others the way it affects you, but seeing, which of 2 or 3 poems was the most effective, which one really touched people the most deeply, the most personally. And that by doing those hangouts, you also give those people that you share that with, the people in your poetry reading club, a stake in this book, a part in its creation, which really carries forwards. And I think one of the things that we all say G+ is so very, very good for is its power as a collaborative platform.
Yes. I think I talked about it last time that one of in my blog I have a part that's called One Message, and I bring from 3 poets 3 poems from 12th, 13th, and 14th century poets that they have the same message, but we have just haven't looked at it. It's forgotten. So I brought that out, and it was really very popular. So I realized that that's what we have to do, to bring this thing to the attention of people and involve them and talk with them, get their perspective. It's just the collaborative you said. It's really with the whole world, I think, because I have worked in that arena, let's say, and I see everything is possible. we don't have to work in the corner, but we can, you know, involve people and become excited about it, and, you know, do something big that impacts people's life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to bring up this comment by Christian Drysdale. Global citizenship is a natural progression for a world in which we can connect at light speeds as easily with somebody on the other side of the world as with our neighbour down the street. And that's absolutely the point. We are at a real crossroads, I feel, in culture. The limitation on us used to be either people we could talk to face to face, or the speed of you know, pen pals, which sometimes was weeks between letters. We suddenly have this ability to connect in real time with almost anybody in the world. As mobile phones have allowed us to, you know, start doing hangouts and video conferencing, we can meet face to face with people almost anywhere. So it's one of those things that I do think that is the real message here. Now, of course, all of this is to do with communication. So somebody's going to be happy, aren't they, Alex?
Yes, yes, it does. I know a couple of authors in Google Plus. They don't have huge followings, but they're using Google Plus to really do what you were talking about, Ammon. They're using Google Plus to not only get their work out there, but get feedback from people. And it's interesting to watch authors today because, especially those that have been authors for a long time, traditionally, a lot of authors use like pseudonyms. A lot of authors aren't used to communicating with the people that read their books outside of their written word, outside of their books. So we actually, as SEO-wise, we worked with a couple of these authors to get them comfortable with using Google+, and they each kind of had to find their own way to connect with people. And authors are in a really interesting position because they are one of those groups of people that don't traditionally talk to other people. They tend to be more people watchers, right? They watch people, they observe the things around them, and they incorporate it into the written word. So it's going to be really interesting to see how books actually progress as we do become this more global society. And okay, I just have to point out that research to this day points out that the internet actually hasn't worked, but research is usually like a year behind, so I still have hope.
Well, yeah, they do argue that there used to be this thing that if you have infinite monkeys at infinite keyboards, just by the laws of sheer chance, one of them will accidentally type the keys in the right order to create the works of Shakespeare. And somebody else said the internet proves that isn't true. We now have infinite monkeys at infinite keyboards and no works of Shakespeare.
We don't think.
As far as we know, that's right. This comes so much back to what you were saying about writing, Gina, and to follow Alex's point, I've always found that a lot of very successful authors are introverts, because that's the mindset in which those narratives build up in our heads. People who are extroverts and talk to people easily get those stories out in dribs and drabs as they happen, whereas it's the introverts, it's the quiet ones, where those stories build up and form inside as a full-blown narrative. And I think that's always been one of the keys, is that a really good storyteller is often somebody who hasn't told this story in pieces as it came together, but has saved it until it's all there.
Well, and I've found it's really interesting, and I'm barely even a beginner, and so I realize there are things that I may say that in a way I'm not really qualified to say yet, but the experience that I've had is that I found myself living through the screen and the keyboard here on Google Plus so much that I just have this hunger to type the words and to think, and this whole process kind of happens in my head that I don't even really, it's just a creative process that I can't necessarily define. And bridging from that and that kind of magical place where the words come to me and the phrases come to me into coming live on video even. You know, how do we have that kind of magical experience where it's just us and our minds and our fingers, and then translate that into an actual physical kind of communicative medium? And I found that to be really scary, and I'm getting over it now. I'm clearly getting over it, but it took me a long time, as some of you know. And Alex has been a great help for me, actually. She kind of got my feet wet for me, but it's really interesting when it's like making art of any kind. It is done in a kind of private space most of the time, not all the time. I mean, there's performance art, the art world and the things that are happening, you can't really say anything like that 100%. But generally, it's a more private activity, and learning how to combine what's the potential that we have online and the potential that we have to be face-to-face with that creative process, I think is just tremendously exciting, because we might start discovering areas and techniques and methods and practices that we still haven't even conceived of. So what I imagine, Farinaz, is that when you get involved in these HOAs with the poetry idea, things are going to change for you pretty rapidly, in my mind. And what you're thinking today, or what we're all collectively thinking today about what your book might be about, there's going to be transformation. It's going to really change once you get into process, because the process is going to begin to inform you on where you want to go with this project. And there are going to be a lot of possibilities, and it's probably going to be more possibilities than you can even handle. So there's going to be some discipline needed for how to structure the thing. And I don't know, it might be really interesting. I don't know if you're talking to David Amerland at all, but he's just a beautiful example of somebody who's using his interaction in his research and in his writing, and has kind of developed that flow. It's always good to learn from the people who've done it before us, right? So just a thought.
Unfortunately, David was busy this week, but he was one of the first people, of course, that I did ask if he could come this week.
I'm not surprised.
Hopefully we'll be catching up with David on another show. However, the thing I was talking about earlier about getting that first step going, getting the momentum going, is so important. Now, the Hangout's one way of doing that, because it will give you a burst of creative energy every time you do that. Usually. There are occasions where being able to talk about it can almost take away some of that. It provides a valve that lets some of the steam out. So you'll need to adjust if you find that that's the case. That you'll need to look at one poem and understand what you want to get from the Hangout and focus.
Yeah. The thing is,
it's always a case of understand what is the message of your book. You start with that. What do I want people to get from this book? Write that down, because that's your framing everything else. You like the word framing, don't you, Alex?
Yes, I do. It's been on my mind, actually, since like the beginning of this conversation, because especially with Gina bringing up your concept of your book is going to drastically change based on the conversations that you have and the feedback you get. And that's fine as long as you have that central message, because that central message is what is going to determine the frame that you use. It's what is going to determine which facts you choose to highlight, which ones you kind of throw in but don't necessarily explain. It's really going to frame everything that you do. So sticking with that message of awareness is going to be absolutely key, no matter how you decide to work through the process of writing the book. So hang on to that. But yeah, I've been thinking about framing since like minute 2. Thank you.
When are you ever not thinking about framing?
Good point. Like never. My share of David Amerland's Sunday Read talked about frame of reference. So
I know.
It's
Where
always
was
there.
you were living the life of the artist. Here you had somebody who was doing nothing but framing, and you had all these canvases. Where was she then?
You know, maybe not born yet, possibly.
Ammons, I have even an image in my mind about the word that all the time comes to me is spontaneity. I'm not very much, I don't believe in having the things really cooked and then give it. For example, I mean, you may laugh at this, but this is what comes to my mind. You start it with a beautiful music, and then that brings the attention of the audience. And then you start with the piece of poetry, and then take it from there with the other things that you have in mind. Make it more spontaneous than, and then the audience will automatically be pulled in. What do you think?
I am a huge fan of spontaneity. Partly because this may come as a shock, but I often question authority. I always question the set way of doing things. You know, the minute somebody says to me, we've always done it this way, I know it's time for it to be revised. Now, it may be that that's still the best way, but I think you do constantly have to check. However, when you're approaching something like a book, you've got to understand the core message. Now, you don't have to be strict with the entire book. You're open to discovery without that. But seriously, that message that you want people to take away, that part you need to decide on early, write it down, and use that to guide everything else you do, and to keep asking yourself, does this fit with the plan?
That's
Am I still keeping to my goal of giving people this message, or, you know, have I drifted too much into wanting to share my feeling on this, or getting too much? You don't want to be too open to change, because you want to have that message. You don't want it getting washed away if the too many other influences come in. So you do want to maintain that. Think of it as a spine on which you're building everything else. You know, this is the backbone of the piece, and you can explore in all directions from that. It's got to be connected.
I agree with that. I just wanted to make it a little bit different from what we see nowadays as HOA, and make it more exciting, make it more spontaneous. But of course, the message of the book is explained, is there. That's the main thing. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and what's really important is, what does the reader get from this? Not just what do I want to say, but what do I want them to read? Because there is a difference.
Yes.
Yes. We can always intend to say something, and we can always intend for people to get the message, but what we need to be doing is always evaluating how effectively we're doing that. And of course, this is something that Alex deals with a lot in her studies of communication, but also Gina, of course, deals with a lot in building websites, because the company thinks it knows exactly what it wants to say, but sometimes they're not getting it across to the audience.
Yeah, the message can get diluted really fast when you have too many ideas. You know, you can just disperse.
The driving force is one thing. I'm very clear about that. That's what is driving me to do this is clear. You're right that we should have that clear. So when that is clear, I'm not going to jump from here there, but everything has to be around that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, very much. And don't feel that everything you do has to be the same project. It's fine for you to do the HOAs, and for not every HOA to guide the book. Sometimes there won't be things in a particular one that actually turned out to be right for the book. Fascinating, exciting in their own means, helps you build up an audience for the book, but it may not be something to put in the book. So always understand that, you know, there are different means and different measures. The same as once you've written that book, if you do a book tour or if you do personal coaching, you're not limited to just what's in the book. You can go wherever you want to do. The book is simply a reference point. And it's added credibility. It's the thing of being able to have, you know, Farinaz, Parsay, the things you've done, and author.
I would say the book itself is just, you know, a piece, an object. The format that takes can be anything. It doesn't have to be something with two covers and a load of paper in the middle. Just that with some text and maybe a couple of pictures. So again, you know, just because it's the way that books have been made in general, use it as a piece of content and repurpose it out as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't limit this in any way, shape or form at the moment. I mean, sometimes I think of your book and I can see it as one of those lovely coffee table books. You know, the ones that you have out on display for people, and it's a mixture of inspiring prose, it's got the imagery, and it's also got some deep thought as well, which is unusual in a coffee table book. But I think that would be a fascinating way to have this as quite a large book, which was very visual and very much an object that people treasured in its own way.
Yeah.
And other times it's much more that book that's on the shelf and always to hand and has several dog-eared pages because we bookmarked parts of it, and it's got, you know, bookmarks stuck in. I think that's a possibility as well, and they're two different kinds of book, and either one is equally valid for the story you have. So that kind of choice is going to come to you. Just be careful that you don't get paralyzed by the choices, and that
Right.
you're able to move forwards with it.
You know, the other day I got a piece of, I said poetry, which I don't have it in front of me. But what it said made me really think. It was very exciting that it said that you want to say that I'm reading books, but you would say I am talking to the dead, but talking with my eyes, something like this. I don't have it in front of me. But this piece is so beautiful. That means you're surrounded by books, that they are not alive in front of you, the writers, but you are actually talking to them, but with your eyes. It's very nice.
I have always seen books myself as a kind of telepathy. It's a way of transferring your ideas straight into another person's mind, and there is a way that a book goes straight into your brain in a way that nothing else quite does. Because so much of it you have to imagine, because the scenery, the context, these things happen in our imaginations. It puts this story in our brain. In our brain is where it happens, whereas a lot of things, the art has happened before it hits our brain. It hits our eyes already fully formed. And with a book, that doesn't happen. So I think there is always something just that little bit more intimate about a book.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm just going to pull up this comment by Scott, and he says, there comes a time for people to satisfy the need to leave a legacy. This, I would say, may be the case for Farinaz. If so, in practical terms, how different, if at all, will the writing experience be for her than for other writers? That's a great question. I think that there are only two kinds of writers. There are those who do it because they think they should, and those who do it because they have to. And Farinaz she's there because that story is inside her, bursting to come out. Is that about right?
That's right. Yes.
Where somebody is doing this because they want that credential, because they want to produce a white paper for work, because they want to produce a book to have as a credit after their name, then it does get to be much, much harder. And if you can't connect, if you can't find the story that you need to tell, that you are so passionate about, that this book is already crying to come out, it's going to be a slightly dull book. There's just no two ways about it. It's always going to come across as a bit like one of those ebooks that was built for profit, rather than a book that had to be told. So always my advice is to try and find that story that you can't not tell, that one maybe that you're even struggling with. Oh, should I tell this? Should I? Maybe this is too personal. No, I think that is exactly the book you do need to tell. You may need to be careful how personal you get with it. You don't always have to tell as many details as you think you do. I've been taking some advice recently on a book that's on my mind. It's one of those things I've been asked over the years why I've never written a book. Why have you never written a book? And it's because, to a large extent, people expect me to write a book about SEO. And SEO changes very, very quickly. Most SEO books are out of date within 2 years. Sometimes they're a little bit out of date by the time they're published. Just the time from writing it to publishing, it's already partly out of date. And that therefore seemed very, very pointless to me. Now there is one SEO book that was slightly different to that, by a friend of mine called Mike Grahan, who ran the SES conferences for a number of years and who I connected with early on in the 2000s. He wrote a book about where search had come from, and he managed to interview lots and lots of people who had built search engines, and brilliant people, where these algorithms had come from, what issues they'd struggled with. Now that remained a useful book because it was about the trajectory, about the path of search engines, about how the industry had evolved. So even when it was out of date, it was still plotting a line you could follow. And that was the only technical SEO book I ever recommended. And I still do to this day. There were some fascinating insights in it. Beyond that, I looked at books like The Purple Cow, The Clue Train Manifesto, the ones that are about the big ideas, which again, they don't change. The Clue Train Manifesto is 15 years old, and it's more true today than it was when it was written. It's more visibly true today than it was when it was written. But I wasn't sure I had that kind of book inside me. And I knew for a fact that that wasn't quite the book that people were asking for. They were looking for the easy tips on SEO. What can we do that will teach us SEO, how to SEO like Ammonize? And there isn't a book for that. And I can't write a book for that because the whole point is I keep revising what I'm doing. Every single project I take on is new ground. Even for the same client, what I've done for them before changes the landscape. I'm always excited about the new job because I can do things today that I couldn't do yesterday. There are new tools that have come along. There's new skills I've learned. There's so much new stuff every time. I love my job. 20 years now, I've never got bored once. But try putting that into a book. There is perhaps these days a book on the things that haven't changed across the years. But that was what stopped me doing the book, because the book they expected was a book that wouldn't have been valuable. These days I think there is another book coming, and that's what I've been doing. So I'm on a similar journey in a way myself, Farinaz, and it is exciting.
It's not so much the book, that it is the process, the creativity that will be there to create that. I'm more excited about that. It's not just having a book, because so many people have so many books, but when I go through that process, that's very exciting for me, and the creativity I can, have and do with it, I don't know how the things are out there, but I'm really counting on that, counting on creativity, on freedom, on spontaneity, and all that.
Yeah, as an artist, one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that I didn't really care very much about my paintings once they were done. It's like it was really the experience of making them that was extraordinary. And once something was finished and out of the studio and in a show or sold or whatever, it became not fully meaningless to me, but it took on, that's when it was having its own life and it wasn't so connected to mine anymore. And when it's done, and you're involved in something else. And it's that process, that thing of time going by and you don't know how that happened and you're just completely immersed and you're bursting with ideas and possibilities. That's the good stuff. That's the juice. And so I think that's kind of what you're saying.
The impact
the end product isn't, we have to pay a lot of attention to what that end product looks like, if it's functioning properly, if it works, but it's not necessarily the thing that then feeds us later.
and the impact you leave on other people, and the communication that boils out of that, and the word that comes together, everything is exciting. That's what I think about most of the time.
Okay.
And with a book, with words, I mean, then because of that intimate experience that Ammon was describing about the sort of the singularity of reading a book and the intimate experience between the reader and the writer, I think that it is different than visual art, where you will get more of an interchange going, and there's a lot more hope for that, I think, with writing and with the internet. So that's especially exciting. And actually, now I'm getting inspired. It's like, what book do I have? So you're already inspiring people.
Oh, that's great.
I'll take Kevin's points in reverse order here. So first of all, he takes the mickey a little bit. How do we SEO like Ammon Johns? You put in time, lots of it. But he also asks, Farinaz, what's your first thought about a title for your book? Have you thought of a title yet?
Oh, it has to be very exciting, not boring. So I think it will come to me. I have some questions which I have written down, and by the way, I need to tell you, I don't know when, but the title is very important, and it has to be exciting and not dry, not a dry subject, and inviting, and it will come to me.
Yeah, I'm still going to favour the one I suggested last week. A piece of prose, P-E-A-C-E. A piece of prose, and the idea of poetry to bring us together.
Yes, I went online also. I looked at all the things we talked last time. There is a lot of ideas, so I have to just start, putting these in order and make a decision. And so you mean about poetry, the one that you're talking? I have some questions, about what we discussed, but I don't know if you have time for me to go through them. So one question was, is that the part that is only poetry? The name?
No, because all kinds of writing have prose. If there's a book, it's full of prose.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things I said earlier is that Gina's work, even her G+ posts, are full of prose. There is absolute beauty in the phrasing, in the pacing, in the way it comes together, and definitely these are works of prose. So that would be my title for your book.
I like that.
Let me just pull up Zara's comment here. So Jack London, via Martin Eden, called the work that was done in the past works performed, and considered them in the past and not current. So that's speaking to your point, Gina.
Yeah, interesting.
Thank
you, Sarah.
I loved telling that story and giving that story its own life. And for me, the works I produce are usually that snapshot of time that now exists in a bubble, safe forever. So in a way, for me, putting things into an artwork, written or image, gave them a kind of eternal aspect, which was what I liked.
Yeah, it fixes it. You know, puts, yeah.
Yeah, but I must admit, you know, I often found I love the challenge of creating it, but once I've solved the challenge, that I'm kind of bored with the creation process sometimes. So I understand that part too. It's just I usually solve the challenge just before I finish the work, so I have to finish the work as well.
But yeah, then you're done. You know, it's on to the next.
And we've got another question for Farinaz. Amelia Hoskins asks, Farinaz Parsay, how about revisiting places you've been in and talking to people about the contrasts between the past and the present with related poetry? So I think that's kind of a journey.
It's good if it's up there, I can see. I didn't quite get what the question was.
Well, so it is on the screen. Lee's got it up there. If you click on Lee, you'll be able to see it.
It's down there, so I cannot see.
How about revisiting the places you've been in, talking to the people about the contrasts between the past and the present with related poetry?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting idea, but I have been there. I've done that even. I've been revisiting. Unfortunately, it's on the surface and not in the depth that I am thinking about. So
But we haven't been there though.
Kevin Burns. Oh, he's got my 6 here. Look. It has to be something very exciting. It will come to me. It's not a dry subject. It's inviting. He absolutely loves that. But he also quotes, I think what I said last week holds, a piece of prose, poetry that brings us together. I like this title best also, Alan, he says. So there you go. He's got my 6. Well done.
And the domain names are still available.
Yeah.
I love it for a domain name. I think it's just brilliant.
yes.
Not so sure for the book, but for the domain name, it's just...
I think for the first book it would be great, but as I say, I think there's a whole series of these books in there because your life has been very, very rich. If you try and put that all into one book, you're either going to have to write War and Peace.
Good point.
War and prose.
Or you're really going to rush this story and miss some of the real depth of it. Even just telling your story without including the poetry, without including the artistic references that build this out, I think if you try and tell it all in one go, it's going to be a huge book. And maybe a little too heavy for one sitting for some people. I do think that you do need to serialise. I think that your time in the Far East, in East Asia, is a book in itself. And I'm certain it is. With references to the past and present, but you know, with that as a particular focus. And I must admit, one of the things I love there is that you could include a lot of the artworks of the Far East, which I mean I tend to love. I love Japanese painting and poetry, and the same with a lot of the Chinese works as well. So a book that had illustrations of that kind, modern and ancient art from that region would it'd already be a sale for me.
Yes. It is, and they are all unique. Each place, they are unique. They have their unique beauties. They have their unique culture. And that's the whole thing about it. You're right.
Yeah. What I love is the fact that you can always contrast this with 2 other cultures, because there's the culture you're in at the time, you know, as in when you were in the Far East. But there's the Persian culture, which is so much a part of your early life.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the American culture, which is so much a part of your latter life.
Yeah.
And being able to bring all 3 and take different perspectives, different views, we're back to perspectives again, is, I think, where this absolutely lives.
most of us won't ever have that. You know, you're really privileged in that way to have those juxtapositions, because, you know, I have always lived in the U.S. and I don't have any clue of what it would be like to be immersed in another culture. So it's just a tremendous piece for sharing. And that's why I love your storytelling in your blog, and I'm really hoping that in the book you will take some of your experiences and tell those stories. You know, tie those to the poetry, because I think that's really grounding, and it's also really validating for how much you have to offer, and it's kind of like a proof of your authority to be in the position you're in to create this piece in the first place.
Oh.
So I think that will be really kind of beautiful.
We do have one other woman of the world, very much so, in our audience, Zara, who, quite the jet setter and very much the Renaissance woman. So that could be somebody who, if she was interested in being part of your poetry group, would be absolutely somebody I'd reach out to, because, again, she's experienced a lot of different cultures. She's lived in different parts of the world, and you know, it was fascinating to meet her personally as well. Of course,
Yeah.
we may have made her a little bit too busy with ideas from her being Ammonized, but, you know, you can help each other out. That's what it's all about.
The support group.
We're in the final stretch now, so before we wrap this up, my big question has to be: has this been worthwhile for you, Farinaz? Have you been filled with ideas and energy in the last week? I know that the audience did their best to give you plenty of positive energy, and hopefully I gave you a few ideas to work with.
Yes, and I was just going to tell you, and I was actually thinking about it the whole last week. That makes me so grateful and excited that I have this energy around me, and so much freshness, and so much that I can connect with, and that actually boosts my creativity and brings out my real intention, and brings out a lot that I know in time I will tell you about it, but I know there is going to come a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, let me just pull up this comment. I think I've missed something. Where do I read poetry by Farinaz? It's on her website, Zara. We did feature this last week. I'll make sure that we get the links into the event page so that you can't miss it.
Yeah.
There's a wealth of stuff already out there. A lot of her story is already told in passing detail compared to what I know there is. And I personally am really looking forward to this book. I really am. Gina, I know that you caught up with last week's show, and I've been absolutely delighted to have you this week. How's it been for you?
I've just really enjoyed this. Speaking of privilege, I just feel incredibly privileged to be part of this, Farinaz and Ammon, and just part of the process and getting to participate in the very early germ beginning of this is just, I'm kind of blown away by that, and how, well, first of all, that you even thought of me for coming on, Ammon. Thank you. I feel a lot of gratitude for that too, and it's just remarkable. I can't wait to witness your process and see where this goes. And is that me?
No. Yeah, can you
There you go. That's better. I can't hear a thing now, so I'm just going to restart for the last 5 minutes.
That's it. Just by Zara. Zara, published poet in the schools for many years. for poetry readings at art festivals. They didn't see it as a visual art, and therefore didn't think it should be there. So yeah, you've got a lot in common with Zara. So I would definitely say connect, and you can do great things. Alex, you weren't expecting to be on the show this week, so did you catch last week's, and how was it for you? You know, have you enjoyed this?
I did. I watch these every Sunday. They're my break from. I don't get to do as much fun writing as you do, Farinaz. I'm in the process of writing very academic, some would call it boring work. So this is always my break from that. But this was really interesting. It's Kristen mentioned in the comments that she really admires you, Farinaz, and I have to agree with her. I completely admire you for going with what you feel is right for you, and it's really interesting to watch you try to figure out how you're going to do what you want to do and the best way to do it. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. I really am.
Thank you so much. Glad to have you here. I'm so glad that you are here.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lee unfortunately has vanished again, so I will have to attempt to channel Lee. Yeah, loved it. Good. I kept quiet, but it was good. I think that's pretty much what he'd say. So thank you everyone for being on the show. Lee, hope you hated that. And we'll be back again next week, although we've got a bit of a magic mystery tour because I don't know what's happening next week. Our guest that was due to be on had to pull out at the last minute. So yesterday I got told I don't have a client for next week. Difficult to fill in 1 week, so I have put out a call to a client that would have been coming later, a guy called Brett Hamilton, who is another form of artist, creates furniture. I don't know if he'll be able to make it. I certainly can't expect him to because it is very short notice. So if he isn't on, we'll be doing a show about the show. I'll be ammonizing Ammonize, and we'll be talking about what we've taken away from the series so far, looking at how the audience are relating to the show, and asking seriously, is there more we can be doing? Is there a way that I can help you get even more from these shows? Is there a way I can make them more practical and useful to people? But for this week, thank you very, very, very much to all of my panelists and to the missing Lee Rickler, and have a great week.
Thank you so much.